And I thought that it may be a good idea to just take a few minutes and walk through the plan itself, our experience, how we put it all together. There is a Q&A box there that you can check if you'd like to add questions or anything to it. We'll have some time at the end, I expect, to be able to field the questions. I just wanted to, again, take a few minutes here up front, maybe just and walk through what it is, the plan itself. And as several people have reached out, sometimes just kind of going through the intent of it and DIR's role and support of it kind of clarifies some of the things. So Tessa, next slide, please. Yeah. So the Joint Oversight Committee on Investment and Information Technology Improvements, it was this is all established through House Bill 4018. This is where the committee is going to be reviewing investment strategies, leveraging a modernization fund that was created in 4018. And there is, it's a real opportunity. Think about how technology has certainly evolved in the minds and hearts of all of the constituents and what we do on a daily basis, from our banking to ordering groceries to government services. And so this fund was created as a methodology, it's a mechanism to be able to take funding and then have the joint committee review it and have committee approval on projects funded. One of the first contributions to the fund was through SB 8 in the special session that took $200 million of ARPA funding and put that into the fund, and was the initial then set of appropriation that the committee is reviewing. There are all kinds of different ways that the Joint Committee may take a look at the different projects and understand more about them. We do have the PCLS submissions that have been going on now for several years that corresponds to the legislative appropriations request. There may be enterprise projects that different agencies are providing information to the committees. There could be cybersecurity and modernization initiatives that are being put forth. And there's, the Joint Committee has essentially their will at how they are looking at projects and being put together for consideration. Next slide. So the Joint Committee itself is made up of 3 Senate members appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and 3 House members appointed by the Speaker. And DIR's role really is support and staff for the committee itself. And one of the big things that I point out in conversations is these reports are for these joint committee members and their staff. We all have a lot of IT appropriations paths, whether that be our typical LARs, there may be PCLS reports, there may be things that we look at internally as we talk about these initiatives and projects. And I know Mac, he rounded the corner a few weeks ago and he's like, my goodness, I keep saying the same thing so many different ways. And that's exactly right. The good news is that there is an enormous amount of interest in IT projects, how we are supplying and servicing the constituents of Texas. And everybody has their perspective and they want to better understand what we're doing. And so this is another way that we are presenting a lot of times an insight and business value for the projects that we're trying to do. Keep in mind who's your audience. So for this particular initiative, it is these members and their staff. Next slide. So a big piece to 4018, and I covered that earlier, was the funding mechanism itself. That's considered section 1, and it talks all about the ability for them to approve projects. The second piece of 4018 gets into an IT modernization plan, and excuse me, the plan itself obviously correlates back to, well, what are the different projects that are being requested, but it doesn't necessarily have to tie straight one for one type of thing. The modernization plan really gets into what is the agency-wide manner in which the entity is looking to transition its IT services into a more modern, integrated, secure, and effective technical environment. And these are due October 1st to Department of Information Resources, as well as the Joint Committee themselves, various standing committees, Senate and House of Representatives. And we provided the template back a couple months ago that really outlines essentially what it is that the agency is looking to do, how IT is involved in that, and subsequently some justification around it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth in each of those. Next slide. So this is the outline of the plan template. It kind of is in a bit a journey, a document is one way that I look at it. Is it again keeping in mind in realizing the role and the leadership in taking enormous amounts of information in and trying to make a perspective and prioritization and understanding to make these very important decisions. What was the format that could be ingested? And so what they thought and worked with DIR is section 1 is just setting out that executive summary and the basis for what is going on within the entity, what are key things that they're looking at, the projects and the funding. Section 2 really is setting the landscape in more detail. I know, and this kind of goes back to it becomes a multi-faceted perspective. Agency objectives and value statements and key business functions and things, without having that in the document, it would be awful hard for them to look at each entity and try and find that and look it up online or all these different things. It's like, well, there should be some ability in this report to restate and just have a understanding and make sure that it's current, right? We all evolve and what our objectives and goals and things are. What is the entity, the agency's current perspective and their objectives and value and business functions? A lot of that ties back and agency strategic plans. And what are those goals, right? So that sets a landscape for probably things that are documented other places, but it enables a one-stop shop for assessment of the modernization plan itself to get that background and to understand what is that vision for the overall entity. Section 3 is really where it gets into the tie around modernization. As you look at those objectives and values and business functions and initiatives that you're trying to go and going back to that first piece where it's a more modern, secure, efficient government, what are the IT modernization initiatives that support that? What would be things that if they don't see it in this particular round of funding, maybe things that they look for in subsequent different modernization fund reviews. It gives that roadmap perspective of where they are wanting to make the changes, what that is either currently entailing, ties to LARs, PCLS, those kind of things, or in the future for major initiatives. And so it is very much, Section 3 is very much this modernization plan. It is the strategy, it is the vision, the forecast of initiatives that are coming forward to meet the business function and goals of the agency. And so that's a critical piece. And within the template, there's room to kind of fit that scale to meet your all's needs. Certainly, and I even understand in very large agencies, it's tough to, at some point, you start putting down, 20, 30 projects and all, it tends to lose what's the priority against, the bigger picture. And so there is somewhat of a limit to those, but it's a pretty quick snapshot of what are those initiatives against the plan. We did realize that sometimes there are some very, very critical technology appropriations requests and things that need to be in the forecast that may not necessarily tie to what is going on in the future, but it could just be to ensure that the operations and the effort of ongoing platforms continue, right? And so that's where we put the IT critical roadmap. There was a lot of question about, what if there is a system and it's doing great, but there may be some component within it that has a end of life issue. We realize that it may be needing just an update in certain facets. It probably doesn't tie back to a major initiative and modernization plan, but it certainly is critical for the agency that those things are understood and that funding and allocation for those components are considered in the picture. And so that's what Section 4 is. That's loosely said, that's ensuring we keep the lights on. List of initiatives and systems that are critical systems that the Joint Committee felt like they should be made aware of, just to make sure that that is considered in their overall deliberations. So once we get that, you get into Section 5 and 6. This is a great opportunity to really provide more information, provide the business value. You get into market research and assessments and really putting forth all of the background information that can help the Joint Committee and their staff really understand what's the point of the initiatives and how that's been thoughtfully crafted and put together. Section 6 gets into those key assumptions. And all of us in the world, especially when it comes in budgetary and these types of project developments, we've all got to make some assumptions. It's a good time to make sure that if there are certain things that are put together around that those are documented then there, right? It's that table stake to just clarify any of your plans. And then Section 7, there's some appendices in there that we put in just as a consideration for the larger picture, is how is DIR and cooperative contracts and technology and all of these things positioned to support what may be coming forward, right? There's no guarantee on any of these initiatives that are being put out there, but it gives us always the ear to the railroad track to make sure that as these things are coming forward, that we're hearing even at the very beginning of the possibilities for these initiatives, and that we're thoughtful as we craft our contracts and we encourage our services to expand and grow, that we're meeting your all's needs. And so those are the key components, a little bit of background and explanation behind it. I hope that that was helpful from a big picture. What I like to do is ask John McKenzie, who is DIR's IT director and IRM, to take a few minutes. And John, would you mind just going through what it is that what we did?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm just kind of give it our perspective, how we handled it to do our plan. As John indicated, my focus is on DIR, the agency, right? So we have to do this plan just like every other agency. We have initiatives and stuff go through. So when this thing came out in July, it first lands on my desk to take a look at it and start prepping it and stuff like that. And it's really, I started pulling stuff together from my other planning and strategy documents that I already used to run my IT, right? Because, we're already, as IT professionals and IRMs, we already know what our hardware, software refreshes need to look like. We already kind of know what our application problems are. Like, do we have some legacy Salesforce Classic stuff that we're going to convert to Lightning? Do I got some old middleware out there that I'm planning on cycling out? Am I moving 20 databases from the private cloud to the public cloud? Some of that operational refresh, modernization stuff that's going on. But then we have our business driven stuff, right? Hey, you've got a business unit that needs a new business line application, or they have a legacy application or a mainframe thing that needs to really get off and modernized into a new SaaS product. Some of it's just totally new capabilities like robot process automation or machine learning, or, moving to a mobile app like TXT and stuff like that. So you got a lot of that stuff, right? So your list, if you sit there and go, well, all this is IT modernization, throw it all in there. Well, this thing becomes a very large, unwieldy documentation and stuff like that. So we very quickly pulled it way back and basically focused on those business-driven major initiatives that were really going to improve the capabilities of the agencies to serve our customers and constituents, right? These are the things the Ledge really wants to hear about. These also tend to be the larger multi-project type of things that require funding that's not built into our baseline and stuff like that. So, once I got kind of that together and had it to a, call it a 75% level, and, had a lot of the little box picked it in there, I started collaboration sessions with a lot of my peers. And key to that is your government's relations, right? Because they're going to really help take that technical speak and put it into Ledge speak, right? Make it business oriented, right? What is a legislator or their staff really going to focus on, and not the bits and bytes that I would talk to, right? So very key into that. With a big focus on data, the data management officer for DIR was key to this conversation collaboration. We actually have one of our modernization initiatives is focused around data and data maturity and data governance for DIR. So he had to chime in, but he was also making sure that all of the data elements in all the other sub projects that made up the other modernization efforts really tied together and fed into that whole new governance structure and stuff like that. And definitely your business units, right? Whoever the executive or director sponsoring some of these business initiatives, driving that requirement into IT, they really need to be there to help ensure that you've captured the business need, what the impact is to your customers and constituents, and what the ROI is, right? Because it's not just an IT perspective on these things, right? We have 4 mod plans, right? So the template lets you go up to 10. We collapsed down to 4. Each one of those has 2 to 4 sub projects in it of various scope. Not all of those are going into our LAR, right? Some of those, roughly only 4. We have 4 EIR asked this session, right? 2 of those are in the ARPA requests, so they're 418. They're in that list for the 200 million. They're also in the PCLS. And 2 of them are also in our EIR. 2 of them are not in front of the ARPA team. They're just in the LAR, right? But they're represented in this IT modernization plan. So they get that complete picture of what your needs are. But it's not just limited to what you're asking for in the 24-25 biennium, right? You're really drawing that longer picture saying, okay, this is what we're asking for now. And you kind of connect the dots between the various communication mechanisms and funding mechanisms John mentioned earlier, so they see that complete picture, but you're also letting them kind of know what's coming next, what's in the 26-27 biennium, right? What's phase 2 or phase 3 of this project, or what are we going to do next time, right? So they see that really that 4 to 6 year evolution, and it shouldn't catch them by surprise, next cycle when you ask for money to do something, right? Because they can see the tie back to what you did in the 24-25 biennium, right? And then obviously, as the 4018 committee gets additional funding beyond this initial 200 million, right, there's going to be requests going into that, right? So they've got to balance that across the speak, the ask and stuff like that. So that's kind of how we approached it. It wasn't a one person or a one IT driven thing. We might have started the process, but everybody came together. Really, it took us about 4 weeks. I had basically an hour working session each week. And then in between those, everybody was doing a piece of that. We kept the document out there on the team side and saw the collaboration. And, I met in general revenue, or not general revenue, excuse me, GR, government relations met with the business units, to actively help drive this forward in between those meetings. And we just kept refining it and refining it. And now basically it's with John Hoffman and the other executives for their final review and to go up to the executive director for signature. And then it'll come back down to me to send off in October 1st. So that's at a high level how we did it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm also happy to meet one-on-one with anybody outside of this if you want to pick my brain a little bit more. So thank you.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much, John. And the point that you brought up is around our initiatives and the strategy that we've got. As I mentioned earlier, some are in current LAR and exceptional item requests. Some are part of the ARPA. There may be things that are also in our longer term strategic. We don't have them in today because they aren't ready today, but based upon approval of the first projects, we know where we are wanting to go. And that just, again, tells the story of DIR, what our initiatives are, how we're looking to be more modern, secure, efficient, and the path that we are looking to be, and explaining it to the Joint Committee and their staff. A couple of questions.
Yeah. John, there are 4 questions. One of them is, what is the time frame?
Yeah, I'll hit these first. So the first one I see is around the appropriation piece. Would you want actual dollars or a list of past or future appropriations? And you want appropriations if it's not LAR, but part of the grant. I think because this is a part of the plan, it's not necessarily Section 1 gets into the modernization fund and request and project specific and those types of things. This is the plan. And so I think that it would be appropriate to talk about what is the overall project cost. That may include grant funding, that may include other things that have already been funded, but this is, phase 2, 3, 4, and such. But it should be spelled out as part of, the assumptions and other documentation and things, but just make sure it's clear, because I think that's a great story. If you're collaborating across multiple facets to get these things done, tell the story. Just make sure there's clarity in what that means from an expected request for appropriations in the future. Should we have concerns about staff salaries and mass exodus? I would keep, I'll answer this way. I think that in as much as it is an assumption for your project, I think that it's appropriate. It certainly is not a pulpit just to state general concerns and such around that. But if there are modernization initiatives and there are critical assumptions or concerns that are tied to it, I think it's appropriate to make sure those are considered as we go forward in the unknown of the workforce and the challenges that we've got. So something each agency can consider. What are those risks and assumptions that they're doing? Next question is, in Section 4, budgetary impact, is it actual dollar amounts or general areas of budgetary impact? I think it's a little bit of art and science there. I think that certainly actual dollar amounts are there. And this also goes into consideration of value and benefit in that, right? There's hard dollars that people see that know for either consumption or benefit, but there's also soft dollars, right? And being able to address that in appropriate context, as far as efficiencies that may be gained, workforce satisfaction, levels of effort, and focusing on priority initiatives versus perhaps some of the, if you think about robotic process automation, it's not an effort to replace employees as much as it is to ensure the effectiveness and efficiency within a workforce. So those types of things I think are certainly appropriate to describe within the project itself. I noticed there was a question about dollar requirement for a project to become major initiative. Hey, there's an awful lot of entities out there, and they range from very small to very large. And so I think major initiative, in my mind, is what it is for the agency. What are your top initiatives that you are seeing? I would hate to put a specific dollar amount on it, but keep in mind, you'll be representing to leadership what your agency considers to be a major initiative. And so that goes back to your GR, and as Mac talked about, being able to understand how you're representing not only your technical components, but the agency and entity itself in those relationships that you have with those joint committee members and staff. Okay, are there other questions? Let me.
There was one on ARPA and PCLS. Should that be mentioned here as well, John?
Does the scale small agency completed major projects? How does this scale small agency has recently completed major modernization projects? I guess to that, and Grace, I'm certainly happy to talk offline specifically, but I think congratulations if you've completed some major modernization projects. That is a great story, especially in the executive summary and talking about the progress that's been made. I hope and I would encourage that you've got what's next all in mind, and where that evolution is going, and it's probably a great place to give that insight to leadership. You have items in PCLS and ARPA, should they be included? Yes. So it's, again, a lot of times we're just like I was talking about with Mac, we have appropriations requests. We see the PCLS summary of those appropriations requests. There's ARPA funding. It's not necessarily a must that if you have PCLS and ARPA tied together, but I think that there is a lot of correlation. If you're looking at cybersecurity projects for ARPA funding, they may have additional criteria from the Treasury grant program, whether that be in dates or methodologies and different things. It may not necessarily be a great project for ARPA, but it would be something that you would want to do in your appropriations and consider it in PCLS. And so I think that it was a discussion that we had as far as what is included there, but that's not so much around the modernization plan. That's more about the ARPA funding itself. Should the plan include the dollar amounts to implement? It certainly should on each of the major initiatives to be able to call out what those values are and give that expectation. If we list project initiatives and next session change, would that be noted on the side? If we list project in next session, in other words, if we had a plan initiative and it goes a different direction, just remove it on the next plan 24. So Jamie, thank you so much. So the way that the legislation is written right now is it says everyone shall submit a plan on October 1st, 2022. End of sentence. There is not one that it does not say, and my GR folks keep me honest, but it doesn't say, and subsequently every appropriations and that. I think that there's the possibility that they look at this, see the value of it, and would determine whether or not that is, again, we do another update in 2 years, possible. But right now it is just for 2022. So my recommendation is in all ways to give a good representation, state your facts and assumptions, what it is that you want to do, and we all realize things change. If it is a risk that something may change, it's worthwhile noting in the section there that has that. But I think that what we are all striving for is a up-to-date, consistent representation to the Joint Committee about all the wonderful things that we have in mind to help support government in a modern and efficient, secure way. Marge. Sending the reports to the URL provided gets it to all required parties. To be determined. We are actually going through and verifying that. The legislation itself does state that it should go to all the different entities there, but we understand not only for you all, but for the joint committee, there may be a request that we help on that. We will provide more information about that as we learn more. But right now, according to the language itself, is everyone's got specific places to send it. And I will look. I don't know if Brady or wants to hop in on top of that or not, but that's where we are right now. Let's see. Dan, should include the amounts needed by the agency to implement? Yes. If agency requested funding through ARPA, should be listed on the initiative page, section 3 of the section 4. Krishna, you may help me on that one. Should it be listed on the initiative page?
So
I think that might go into section 3 with the mod plan itself, that, hey, we've got a PCLS or we've got ARPA funding requested for this one. You kind of highlight that.
Oh, I see where you're going there.
Yeah. Where do you say you're requesting that funding and what venues, right? Yeah.
Well, and I think so going between section 3 and section 4, I think is where you're going on that, Tina, is I would look at, if you're putting ARPA funding out there for a modernization initiative, kind of that go forth vision piece, certainly that should still be in 3. If it is something that's a little more around end of life, maintaining, keeping the lights on, in loose terms, in section 4, that's appropriate there. I think that in either place, if there's an opportunity to call out that it is in the current list of ARPA projects, it's probably a good thing.
And also during the hearing, John, if you remember, they were suggesting that the request should be somehow represented in the strategy document so that there is a genuine case when they review the funding and go through which one to be funded or which one to be funded later on.
That's right. And there was a joint committee hearing on August the 30th. And if that certainly is on file, if anyone is interested in hearing the joint committee, there were comments around, well, the modernization plan that will be coming and how does this tie back to the projects we're seeing and that. And so if there's insight and you haven't seen that, it's an hour probably worthwhile for y'all to listen to that. Section 5, desired formats, bullet narrative. Krishna, is it bullets, or I think we just left it pretty open where if somebody wants to do an introductory sentence or two and then list out the different points, that's fine. If there's other, it's left to each entity.
Ours was a combination of those, right? In section 5 and 6 and stuff like that. I would say not to put a bunch of attachments in there. I mean, you might put some amendments or some excerpts from it, but I wouldn't give them too much to dig through.
Yeah, this is like John and Max said, is more of a business document. This should relate to the legislatures and different committees and their staff and everything. So it'd be better if you keep it very concise and have those additional reports and documents ready when you have a discussion or when you're called in for a meeting, etc.
Yeah. So Marge, on your question, will we know who to send the report to? The interesting part on this, and it gets into the section C of it, and it goes to so submit to DIR, submit to the Joint Oversight Committee, but then it goes into standing committees of the Senate and House of Representatives with primary jurisdiction over state agency information technology. And I think a question that I've got and we need to get clarity on is that going to be the same for everyone? There may be standing committees that have specific interest in a particular component of the government that and their IT that I wouldn't necessarily know. And so I think that in an effort to ensure that, everyone who should be informed I would look to each entity to have their GR folks give some consideration around who that is for their own, right? because it is pretty complex over who the committee has jurisdictions over and that. And I'm not sure that, that there's a one easy answer that I can just publish.
John,
yeah.
we have started receiving some final to the IT modernization plan, this email that is being shared here. So do you think it's safe to send it to that email ID for DIR?
Certainly for the DIR, and we will work on communication and update if there's any way that we can simplify that, and we get approval from the joint committee to do that. We will certainly let the IRMs and the GR folks know. Okay. Oh, thank you so much, John, for posting that the committee hearing. That's great. Well, I'm a few minutes over, and I hate that, but good questions, good insight. Again, we do have the email address there that things could be sent to. Myself, you can find me easy enough, john.hoffman@dir.texas.gov. John McKenzie offered his support. Krishna is always great, and all the technical components and facets and how those things. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to moving forward through this session, all of the interim, the session itself, and all the great focus that's being put on IT modernization. So thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.